Hi, so Paulie here. So I had a best friend in my teenage years. We were role-playing buddies. This is my friend Damien, and he was one of those incredibly enthusiastic guys who was particularly into science fiction, loved his fancy, but science fiction, and we were just inseparable. So he's unfortunately, I have survived him. However, he left me with something. This is called Space Quest. Now, this is an early role-playing game. It's literally rare as hen's teeth, and it's a forgotten gem of the role-playing genre. So this was Tier Game Makers. So Paul Hume, George Nyan. Paul Hume, you probably recognize. He went on and did a lot of material with Fantasy Games Unlimited. He did things like Bushido. Space Quest was a delight. So at this stage, you know, D&D and so on is still out there. When did this thing come out? 1977. So again, early days in role-playing. We've had basic, original D&D is out. I don't think the basic set is maybe just hit the shelves. Traveller has maybe just hit the shelves, but this thing came out. So Traveller was science fiction, hard science fiction. This was not. This was absolute space opera, and it is glorious, absolutely glorious. You'll have to excuse, I will remove the covers because they haven't survived as well as everything else. However, good old Space Quest. So, the fun thing with this was, everyone basically has some kind of sonic powers. It's a far off future. You've got this big kind of interesting corporation-y kind of corporate feudalism government for this high-tech civilization that you're in. A bit like Dune, their idea was that humanity has advanced. So you've got classes, which science fiction games normally didn't do at that stage. And those classes all have powers that went with them. So there were out-and-out psionics, and there were healers and so on, but even the warrior sorts, they're actually kind of way better than just like a normal grunt-style soldier. They actually have kind of resources they can really draw on. The ship's engineers, they actually kind of mentally attune with engines. The pilots, they plug in and mentally interface with the ships, and they guide these things through hyperspace. You can't fly these things without being able to actually plug in. Computer techs, everyone sort of can plug in and have these powers. As your character advances, you gain more power. So there's wonderful kind of random charts. You gain more and more things that you can do. So it was very, very colourful. There were different races that you could go. One of them I really liked was the Trilax, which are these kind of trilaterally symmetrical things, got 3 legs, 3 arms, and so on. So they had some nice little alien races that you could take. And there were reams of equipment and all these sorts of things, which was kind of neat. You could do things like buy clone insurance for your characters, because if they went out there and got killed, well, what you do is you take a clone of yourself as you are now. You can go for an adventure. If your character gets killed, well, you get the character back, but he's as he was before you went on the adventure. He is as he was when you cloned him at the clone bank, and you can update your clones. Costs you money. What was fun about this was that space travel was absolutely dangerous. So you designed a ship, the idea was you'd be space explorers of some sort. You'd put your characters in hock, you get loans and so on, which there are all systems in here, and you would design these ships. And the ships actually were modules that you put together, and the size of it, you had to have a certain number of power generators and whatever to drive it up to speed. And there were some really nice rules for real space and hyperspace. They had a 3D map. How to make a 3D map and how to figure out where you were going very simply. But simple maths, you pick where you're going. And given the speed of the ship, it gave you how long it would take you to get there. And it would divide that into hours. You would roll percentile dice for each 100 hours that you're out there. Or you'd start off and you'd roll percentile dice, and whatever came up on those percentile dice, that was when a space travel encounter happened. So off you take, roll dice, 63. On the 63rd hour something happens. Then you'd roll percentile dice from that point on, and that's when your next encounter happened. I roll a 21, all right, 21 hours after that encounter, this happens. There were different things that could happen to you in normal space and different things that could happen in hyperspace. So you actually had to plan shifts, and you'd have to have characters actually on guard. You'd have to have guys manning weapons. You'd have to have guys in the ship on guard in different areas, wandering around equipped. You'd actually have to figure this out, because it could be that you come up against some sort of floating space beast. It could be that you come up against another ship that had great ship rules and great rules for ships versus giant, space amoebas, giant space beasts, all these sorts of things. There were limpets that could get on there and try and suck the energy out of your drives and all these sorts of things, but there were also things that could teleport on board or could smash into you and pour creatures, on board. So you had to be kind of willing and ready to fight at any given time against all these things that could happen to you. And the hyperspace ones were completely different to the real space. So it was an adventure actually traveling. But then it had the best random star system generator I've ever seen. Spectacularly well done by people who'd actually paid real attention to the science. So you generated the star type, and you generated the different orbits and the type of masses of the planets and the type of gas and fluids that are present. But then you got to see what kind of life systems were there, and there's a fantastic system for generating not only what the general shape of these creatures are, but also what their society was. So you might find a place and you randomly generate something. This is an asteroid field. There are actually sentient creatures here that use a type of gill that filter some kind of minerals out of the local dust, which they're metabolizing to allow them to exist. Oh, I can see that. All right. They communicate through radio burst, and you do a little system and you find out, well, these things are entirely kind of clannish. They're highly xenophobic. They don't like other critters, and they have certain things they fear and so on. And you could also generate what sort of goodies these things have that might be valuable for trade, or you could try and do, if you wanted, you could try and do a whole space Viking thing. You could find primitive societies and thunder down there with mercenary companies and try and shoot them all and nick their stuff. Or you could be the great explorers and diplomats that literally go forth and find alien worlds, in this case really alien worlds, and try and contact these guys and try and speak to them. And there was equipment so you could get in there and try and deal with giant creatures that float around in the atmospheres of Jovian planets, and these high G suits that you could wear if you had to go down onto high gravity. And in the middle of this, there's pirate bases, and these things that you encounter while traveling can lead to other things. So some inimicable races and so on that were holdovers from these old wars that you're trying to find, and you could get rewards for all this sort of thing money wise. And so a really beautiful piece of work. They had this great combat system where they had weapons had a penetration and they had a damage, and the damage is a set dice, and the penetration, it rolled penetration number of dice. So if my penetration is 4 and my damage is like d6s, I roll 4d6. Armor stops the penetration. So if I've got armor that stops 3 points of penetration and you fire 4 points of penetration at me, 1 penetration point gets through by times the damage. 1d6 is what affects me. Very interesting way of doing damage. It was split into projectile weapons and energy weapons. There were some interesting things of these fluid guns, splat guns, that you could load up, and they could fire stuff that's designed to freeze things or gum things up, web guns, acid, all these sorts of things. The guys with very high psychic powers can't use a lot of the heavy energy weapons because it interferes with them, so they have to use, boring stuff like normal projectile weapons. This is a spectacular piece of work. It was never been reprinted. It was just a one-shot that these guys did. They've never put it up on drive-through. Every now and then you'll find a copy of this for sale on eBay. If you see it, get it. I have 2 copies. One was mine and one was my old mate Damien's. So, look, Paul Hume, George Nguyen, if you're out there anywhere, guys, contact me. I would like to redo this game, please. I would like to sharpen this out and get it back out there if you don't want to do it yourselves. But I think you guys deserve credit where credit's due, and I think you should get this back out again. This was the first out and out crazy space opera game at a time when Star Wars hadn't really come out yet. They brought this out when Star Wars came out. These are contiguous. It didn't inspire them. They worked on this stuff by themselves. One of the great lost classics of the role-playing genre. If you ever see it, get it. Magnificent piece of work. Dense text, hard to read, of course, in a modern sense, but it's actually a very clear game. It's full of stuff that you could mine for doing your own game designs, obviously, and doing your own campaigns. And I think this is an absolute 5-star classic of the genre.